As my name is Alexa, I am 33 years old and I had spent years pretending my childhood wounds didn't exist. But on that Christmas morning, everything I thought I'd buried came roaring back. My stepdad, Richard, had always favored his biological daughter, Megan, and this year I was the punchline. I remember walking into the living room, carefully dressed, trying to ignore the tinsel, the blinking lights, and the fake cheer that decorated the house I once called my own. The smell of cinnamon and pine filled the air, clashing with the tight knot forming in my stomach. Richard's laughter cut through the room like a knife, echoing off the walls as Megan tore open her gifts with a manic excitement that made my chest ache. "Look at you, Alexa," he smirked, his voice dripping with amusement, always last, always overlooked. It was said so casually, so lightly, as if it were a joke, but I felt the sting deep inside. I forced a smile, gripping my coffee cup like a lifeline, trying to pretend it didn't matter, even though every ounce of me burned with humiliation. My mom, who had always turned a blind eye when Richard humiliated me or treated me like I didn't belong, avoided my eyes. She sipped her coffee and nodded at Megan, never once acknowledging the sharp knife of Richard's words. I wanted to disappear into the wallpaper, to fold myself into the shadows and pretend the world wasn't looking. I wanted to run, to escape this place that should have felt like home, but something inside me refused. That humiliation, the casual, cruel favoring of Megan, the way Richard's gaze would soften for her and harden for me, lit a fire I couldn't ignore. It was as if all the years of being the stepdaughter nobody cared about suddenly erupted in my chest, demanding attention, demanding justice. I realized then that I could no longer just endure. I could no longer smile politely and let him think he had won. The first step wasn't anger, the first step was observation. I started paying attention to every little detail. I noticed the way Richard moved around the house, how he calculated what he said, how he manipulated the household finances in subtle ways that seemed invisible to everyone else. I noticed the tiny acts of emotional abuse he sprinkled throughout our days, the offhanded remarks about my incompetence, the exaggerated praise for Megan when she did the same things I did, the way he would insist I was imagining things when I pointed out inconsistencies in bills or purchases. It all became a pattern, it all became a map I could follow if I was smart enough. I realized that anger alone wasn't enough. Anger was messy, visible, and fleeting. Anger could be ignored, shrugged off, or redirected to make me look irrational. No, I needed proof, I needed power. And I was ready to get it. I started small, pretending to play the role he expected me to play, the compliant, overlooked stepdaughter who smiled politely even when her world felt like it was crumbling. I laughed at his jokes, even when they hurt, and nodded when he belittled me. Every step was calculated, every smile was a mask. Behind the mask, I became meticulous. I began documenting everything. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to rewrite reality in his favor, I recorded it, photographed it, saved digital copies, and cataloged it in ways only I would understand. I didn't want revenge that looked like a scene in a movie. I wanted control that couldn't be denied. While he laughed and played the role of the benevolent father figure, I was quietly taking notes, building an arsenal. I became a ghost in my own home, watching him interact with the people I once trusted, observing the way he treated my mom, the way he assumed I wouldn't notice. I noticed everything, and with every observation I felt the weight of possibility. I realized that I could turn all this humiliation, all this favoritism, all the casual cruelty into something that belonged to me. I could transform it from a source of shame into a weapon of liberation. The thought of standing up, of confronting him directly crossed my mind, but I knew better. A hasty confrontation would ruin everything. Richard thrived on chaos, on conflict, on emotional reactions he could twist to his advantage. If I reacted the way I felt like reacting, I would give him the upper hand. Instead, I learned patience. I learned how to wait, how to act when the moment was right, how to let the evidence speak louder than my voice. Each day, I added to my collection emails, receipts, recordings, photographs, notes, and as I did, I felt something unfamiliar but exhilarating. Hope. Hope that the power he had wielded over me for so long could be turned around. Hope that the house that had once been a prison, a stage for his favoritism and lies, could one day be mine again. not just in possession, but in spirit, in control. And as I sipped my coffee that Christmas morning, forcing a smile while Richard and Meghan celebrated their predictable triumph, I realized something even more important. This wasn't just about the house or about him, or even about being seen. It was about reclaiming myself, piece by piece, from years of being told I was less than I was. It was about learning that patience, strategy, and careful observation could turn even the deepest wounds into power. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I would endure, I would watch, I would document, and when the time came, I would reclaim everything he had taken from me. Not with shouting or violence, but with the quiet, unstoppable force of truth. The days after Christmas were a haze of silent observation, each morning blurring into the next as I moved through the house like a shadow, careful not to draw attention while keeping my eyes open to everything Richard did. I set up a small system, simple to anyone who might glance my way, but precise enough to capture everything I needed. Discreet recordings hidden in plain sight, photographs taken at moments he thought I wasn't watching, a meticulous digital trail of every lie, every misstep. Every small fraud he thought invisible, insignificant, beneath notice. I became a ghost in my own house, slipping through hallways, lingering in corners, listening to conversations and recording every casual cruelty, every favor he doled out to Meghan that I never got, every manipulative comment thrown at my mom or me that he passed off as a joke. I learned how to anticipate his movements, to predict which rooms he would be in at which times, which doors he would leave unlocked, which moments were perfect for catching him in his own deception. It was exhausting in a way I hadn't expected, this constant vigilance, but there was a strange satisfaction in it too, a steady, simmering sense of control growing inside me for the first time in years. I could feel the power of knowing, of seeing, of understanding the man who had made me feel invisible for decades. Every small detail became a weapon in its own right. The way he shuffled the bills to cover his tracks, the way he praised Meghan in front of friends while subtly undermining me, the way he manipulated my mom's perception of me so she would question her own memory of events and doubt my sanity. I started keeping everything, every conversation recorded, every email saved, every receipt photographed, every slight cataloged in an ever-growing collection that felt almost alive under my fingertips. One evening, the kind that seemed ordinary on the surface, he erupted over a minor household mistake I had barely even noticed myself. "You'll never understand what it takes to run this family," he barked, storming out of the kitchen with that condescending smirk he wore when he thought he had one again. My chest tightened, my hands curled into fists, but I stayed silent, forcing my face into the expression I'd learned to wear, calm, polite, indifferent. That night, when the house finally fell into quiet, I played back the audio I had captured on my phone, sitting in the dark and listening as he sneered at me, as he laughed at his own favoritism, as he made Meghan the centerpiece of his attention while I was minimized to nothing. Every word, every tone, every casual cruelty was documented. I let it sink in slowly, almost savoring the reality that for once I had proof, and this proof was something he could not erase or twist. It gave me a strange, almost addictive clarity. I started keeping records not just of his words but of his actions, cataloging every small instance of Meghan's special treatment, noting every financial trick, every misfiled bill, every legal loophole he exploited without hesitation. I was meticulous, slow, careful, knowing that one misstep could cost me the leverage I was building. I even noticed the little ways he tried to manipulate my mom into believing I was paranoid, that I was imagining slights, that I was overly sensitive. But this time I wasn't. I saw the manipulation for what it was and took detailed notes, watching and recording while keeping my expression neutral, my demeanor calm. I felt a strange calm myself, a quiet confidence that came from knowing I was one step ahead, that while he laughed and thought he controlled the house, I was quietly building the kind of arsenal that couldn't be ignored, that couldn't be laughed off, that couldn't be denied. Power, I realized in those long, lonely hours of observation, didn't come from yelling, from angry confrontations, from dramatic showdowns. Power came from patience, from preparation, from understanding your opponent so completely that every move they made played right into your hands. I would wait. I would watch. I would let him continue believing he had the upper hand while I accumulated the undeniable truth, a collection so thorough, so complete, that no argument, no excuse, no manipulation could withstand it. And in that quiet, when the house was still and my mom had gone to bed and Megan was off laughing with friends on the phone, I would review my files, cross-reference bills, compare recordings, and feel a subtle thrill. The humiliation, the favoritism, the casual cruelty, all of it was slowly being transformed into power, into evidence, into a force I could wield without losing my own integrity or composure. I began to visualize the day when I would no longer be the invisible stepdaughter, the quiet observer, the one humiliated for the amusement of others. I imagined standing there, calm and collected, presenting my case, showing the proof that had been painstakingly gathered, and watching the balance of power finally shift. Each day, as I moved through the house in silence, recording, noting, watching, I felt more in control of my life than I had in years, as if the house itself, once a prison of favoritism and lies, was slowly bending to my strategy, acknowledging that I was no longer the powerless one. And in that realization, in that long stretch of deliberate patience and careful action, I understood something essential, that true strength wasn't loud or angry or obvious. True strength was quiet. True strength was invisible until it struck, precise and unstoppable. That night, sitting alone in the living room with my phone in hand, listening to the evidence of years of manipulation and cruelty, I smiled for the first time in what felt like forever. The house wasn't his, not really. The control wasn't his, the upper hand wasn't his, I had it. And all I had to do was wait for the right moment to show it. Months of quiet work, endless hours of patience and observation, every late night spent reviewing recordings, every painstakingly documented email and receipt, every single note cataloging the lies, the favoritism, the small manipulations Richard had thought invisible, finally paid off in ways he never, not for a second, expected. I remember walking into the lawyer's office that day, feeling a strange mix of nerves and calm, carrying with me a digital folder that held everything I had collected over months. Audio recordings that captured his condescending tone, video clips of the blatant favoritism toward Megan, scanned documents of the bills he'd fudged, and the written record of his lies and emotional manipulation. My hands didn't shake. My chest didn't tighten the way I thought it would. I had rehearsed this moment in my mind countless times, imagining the way his smirk would falter the instant the evidence was laid bare, and now it was real. The lawyer flipped through the files methodically, nodding as she read, her eyes widening slightly at the thoroughness, the undeniable proof. And then she looked at me and said, "You've got a very strong case, Alexa. Every piece of this is solid. He won't see it coming." I felt a quiet satisfaction, a calm thrill that coursed through me in waves. Months of endurance, of pretending everything was fine while silently preparing, were culminating into this single, unstoppable force. When we filed the legal papers, I could almost feel the shift in the universe around me. For years, the house had been Richard's playground, a place where his favoritism reigned and I was made to feel small, invisible, and powerless. And now, with one set of documents, one careful plan, that power was no longer his. It was mine. I held all the cards. The day of the legal eviction arrived like a slow-motion scene from a film. I watched from the doorway, standing tall, grounded, feeling every heartbeat as Richard walked in, stiff and pale, the confident smirk that had always adorned his face now gone, replaced by disbelief and a flicker of panic. Megan clung to him, her usual confident chatter muted, as if she finally realized that the control they had exercised for so long over this house, over my mom, over me, was gone. And in that moment, I felt an unexpected surge of calm. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't throw accusations in his face. I didn't gloat or let any shred of vindictive satisfaction escape. I simply handed him the legal notice, my hand steady, my voice quiet but firm, the words deliberate. "You're leaving, today." The room fell silent except for the rustle of paper and the faint sound of Megan's breathing as she processed the reality of the moment. Richard's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth, probably to argue, to try to twist this moment into a story where he was still in control, but he quickly realized that there was nothing left to manipulate. There was no spin, no excuse, no opportunity to reclaim authority. Everything he had relied on for years, his casual lies, the favoritism, the manipulation of my mom, the subtle intimidation, was documented, undeniable, and legally binding. Watching them gather their belongings, the boxes and bags moving slowly through the house they had never truly earned, I felt something I hadn't anticipated: relief. It wasn't just relief because I had reclaimed my home, though that was incredible enough. It was relief because I had reclaimed myself, my dignity, my sense of agency that Richard had tried to crush with his constant favoritism and belittling behavior. I thought about the months of careful planning, the silent endurance of humiliation, the quiet documentation, the long nights spent watching and waiting and preparing, and realized that every single second of it had led to this moment, this profound turning of the tables. As they exited the house for the last time, dragging boxes and suitcases, their expressions a mix of disbelief, anger, and grudging acceptance, I looked around, inhaling the familiar sense of the living room, the kitchen, the hallways, and even the quiet corners that had once felt like traps. I imagined the house free from manipulation, from favoritism, from lies. Every room, every wall, every corner belonged to me again. It was my space, my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without fear or shame. And in that quiet, lingering moment, I felt something that went beyond satisfaction or victory. I felt justice, the kind that is earned through patience, observation, and perseverance rather than rage or revenge. I felt a deep, unshakable sense of justice, a knowledge that the humiliation and favoritism and small cruelties of the past could no longer touch me, could no longer define me. I walked through the house slowly, touching surfaces, feeling the warmth of the sunlight streaming through the windows, imagining how I would fill the rooms with my own life, my own choices, my own rules. The weight of years of suppression, of being overlooked, of being told I didn't matter, lifted in waves. And as I stood there, alone, letting the quiet settle around me, I realized that true victory wasn't about retaliation or punishment. It was about reclaiming control, reclaiming space, reclaiming life. Richard and Megan were gone, but more importantly, the hold they had over me, over my sense of self-worth, over my home, over my peace, was gone too. In that moment, I allowed myself to feel pride, satisfaction, and a calm sense of empowerment that no one could take away. I had endured, I had observed, I had planned, and I had acted. The house was mine. My dignity was mine, my life was mine, and for the first time in years I felt whole. Sitting on the couch alone, I finally allowed myself to breathe, feeling the kind of deep, steady exhale that comes after years of holding in fear, frustration, and anger. The house smelled of pine and sunlight streaming through the windows, the warm glow hitting the furniture and the walls in a way that made it feel alive again, like the home I had once imagined but never fully claimed. For years, Richard had made me feel invisible, powerless, small, like I didn't belong, like my presence was a burden to everyone in the house, especially him. Every favor he gave to Megan, every sneer he threw at me, every whispered manipulation behind my mom's back had chipped away at my confidence, leaving me walking on eggshells, quiet and careful, always pretending nothing hurt when everything did. But now, every corner of this home reminded me that I had endured. Every hallway, every room, every detail bore witness to my patience, my planning, my quiet observation, and the careful work that had allowed me to finally reclaim this space. I thought about the countless nights I had spent watching, listening, documenting, the long hours of strategizing while pretending to be small and compliant, the emotional weight of carrying humiliation silently, storing it as evidence, letting it build into something that could no longer be ignored. And in this moment, with the house finally mine, I understood the depth of my own strength. I reached for my phone, hesitant but determined, and dialed my mom. I needed to hear her voice, to hear acknowledgement that this victory wasn't just about walls and furniture, it was about reclaiming family, reclaiming trust, reclaiming life itself. "Mom," I said, my voice firm but quiet, steady with the calm of someone who had fought long and hard for this moment. "This house is ours again. I'm done being the outsider." There was a pause on the other end, and I held my breath. Then she sighed, a deep, almost weightlifting sigh, and said softly, "You deserved this, Alexa." Her words felt like sunlight breaking through clouds, a quiet validation that I hadn't realized I craved so deeply. She didn't argue, didn't try to soften the statement, didn't apologize excessively or make excuses for what Richard had done. She simply recognized what had always been true, that I had endured, I had prepared, and I had finally won. I hung up the phone and set it aside, letting the silence of the house wash over me, thick and comforting. I began to walk slowly through the rooms, letting my fingers graze the walls, the door frames, the furniture, all familiar yet now filled with a new kind of ownership. These were the spaces I had once felt trapped behind, spaces where I had tiptoed, where I had learned to stay quiet, to smile and nod while my feelings were minimized, but now they were mine in a way that no one could take away. Every corner, every nook, every small detail became a reminder that I had fought not with aggression or anger, but with intelligence, patience, and meticulous care. I realized then that revenge wasn't about hurting Richard or Megan, wasn't about shouting or humiliating them, wasn't about proving them wrong in a public spectacle. Revenge was about reclaiming dignity, respect, and life, about taking back control without losing my integrity, about standing tall in a house that had always been mine but had never truly felt like it. And in that understanding, a profound sense of calm settled over me, a calm that was stronger than any thrill or satisfaction I might have felt from seeing them shocked or defeated. I could feel the weight of years lifting from my shoulders, and it was exhilarating and humbling at the same time. I moved into the kitchen, opening cupboards, running my hands along the counters, appreciating the little things I had taken for granted before, the way sunlight fell on the hardwood floors, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the soft creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. Each sound, each sensation was proof that the house was finally a sanctuary, a home, a place where I could breathe freely without fear or restraint. I sat down again on the couch, this time with a cup of coffee in my hands, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, letting the aroma fill my senses, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to just be. I didn't think about Richard, didn't think about Megan, didn't dwell on the manipulation or the favoritism or the cruelty that had once defined this house. I let it all fade into memory, a chapter that had shaped me but no longer controlled me. I smiled, a quiet, private smile that had nothing to do with gloating and everything to do with recognition that I had endured, that I had fought, that I had won. Richard and his family were gone, removed not by force, not by anger, but by the undeniable weight of truth, preparation, and patience. And in that truth I was finally free, not from the past itself, but from its power over me. The house was mine, the peace was mine, the dignity was mine. And as I sat there, listening to the quiet settling in every room, I understood something I hadn't known before. Victory could be quiet, calm, and enduring, and it could feel so much better than any moment of revenge ever could. This was my life, my home, my space, and my freedom. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole, complete, and unshakably in control of my own story.